Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Carolyn Kolleth, and I'm a registered nurse. And I'm putting on this educational presentation in tandem with Growth and Wellness Psychological Services and University of Michigan Flint Nursing School. And today we're going to talk about something that affects every family, which is screen time. We'll explore how screens impact kids' health, both physical and mental, and most importantly, how you as parents can take steps to build healthy tech habits at home. My goal isn't to shame or scare, but to support you with information and practical tools that you can start using today. So here's what we'll cover today. We'll start by discussing why screen time matters, both nationally and here in our local community. Then we'll go over recommendations, the impacts on sleep, mental health, and physical well-being, and dive into topics like social media, cyberbullying, and internet safety. Finally, I'll share practical strategies and tools for setting screen time boundaries and creating a family tech plan that fits your household. To this presentation, you will notice that we also attached a couple of documents. You're going to want to take a look at those as we're going through this presentation. The shorter one, which is a questionnaire, is meant for you to be filled out as I'm going through the content, just to kind of take stock of where you're currently at in your screen time habits and boundaries with your kids. And then at the end, there's the family tech plan. It's significantly longer, but filling out that questionnaire as we're kind of going through things and you're thinking about it actively will help you when you go to fill out the family tech plan at the end. So let's get into why does screen time matter? So nationally, screen time is a public health priority. Healthy People 2030 highlights the need to improve sleep, increase physical activity, and reduce youth anxiety and depression, which are all areas that screen time affects greatly. Locally in Macomb County specifically, 60% of residents see mental health as a top concern. Macomb County Health Department sent out a survey a year or two ago to residents of every single municipality in the county asking what the residents wanted addressed, and over 60% of people rated anxiety, depression, and mental health issues in their top 3 priorities. So this means we're not just talking about a generalized issue. It's something that families here are experiencing and struggling with, and they want help with it. Excuse me. Screen time for entertainment, which is above and beyond screen time used for educational use. So things like social media, gaming, and YouTube has jumped significantly. Teens are averaging almost 9 hours a day, and tweens ages 8 to 12 are about 5.5 hours a day. And that's a huge portion of their day. And research has linked this to issues like anxiety, depression, sleep problems, and obesity. We don't have all the specific answers in the research about the effects of specific activities, but I want to give you a basic understanding of the current research so you can make informed choices for your family. What I mean by that is we don't know in the research the difference between watching YouTube videos on anxiety and depression versus commenting on a TikTok video. It's hard to extrapolate out the very, very specific activities online that are driving the results that we're seeing, the uptick in the anxiety and the depression. So right now it's all basically under screen time. What you're going to need to look out for is, and I'll get into this later, but how specific activities online affect your specific kids, because it's going to be different for everybody. All right, so we're going to take a look at the American Academy of Pediatric Screen Time recommendations. It's a good place to start. So these are the current guidelines. So for young children under 18 months, infants basically, they want you to avoid screen time except for video chatting entirely. No TV, anything like that. The way babies' brains develop, they really need to look at human faces to start developing their language and cognitive abilities. And research has shown that excessive screen time in that age group is linked to language deficits and cognitive dysfunctions. Preschoolers should be limited to about an hour a day. And then for older kids, the focus kind of shifts to balancing, making sure that screen time doesn't replace sleep, exercise, or real life connection. So think of screen time like junk food. It's not inherently bad, but it's best in moderation. So I'm going to mention this now, and you'll hear it a few times throughout the presentation, but children imitate what they see in their environment. Creating balance with your family and screen time starts with analyzing and changing the way you interact with screens as well. So let's talk about sleep. Screen time, especially before bed, is a major disruptor. It's not just about staying up late, watching screens, but blue light from screens actually interferes with melatonin production, the hormone that regulates your sleep cycle, which makes it harder to fall and stay asleep. And the less sleep kids get, the more likely they are to turn to screens the next day out of habit or fatigue. It's a two-way street and it's a vicious cycle. So taking a look at this chart here, which is from the American Academy of Pediatrics, infants need 12 to 16 hours of sleep, including naps. Toddlers 1 to 2 years old, need 11 to 14 hours. Preschoolers 10 to 13 hours. School-age kids up to 12 years old need 9 to 12 hours. And teens need 8 to 10. A lot of kids think, or a lot of teenagers think that, oh, I'm an adult, I don't need as much sleep now, but teenage adolescence is the second fastest rate of growth out of any age group outside of infants. And so that kind of growth is largely cognitive. And your brain needs a lot of energy in order to grow properly. So I know teens might not think they need the sleep, but they actually do, almost as much as a newborn would. Sleep issues are common. Over a third of young children and more than 75% of high schoolers don't get enough sleep. Screens in bedrooms and use right before bedtime play a big role in this. This isn't just about being tired. Poor sleep is linked to learning and attention difficulties, mood problems, and increased screen use, creating a cycle that can be hard to break. Studies show that blue light can even affect infants when they're not directly watching it. So the passive use that parents have of TVs and their screens can affect the sleep cycle of infants. Sleep is also one of the largest influencers of mental health. Your brain can't regulate as well when it's fatigued. Your brain uses the most resources of any organ in your body. It uses the most energy. It uses the most sugar. So if you're not sleeping, your brain literally can't grow and can't function the way it's supposed to. So here are some sleep hygiene tips. You're going to hear the term sleep hygiene a lot in a lot of resources. You may have already heard it before. Sleep hygiene refers to the routine and the set of behaviors that you use to promote regular, good quality sleep. It's going to be different for every single kid, every single family. And honestly, parents, you guys are going to be the experts in what works for you and your kids. This is definitely a great place to start. Approach it with a collaborative mindset. Get your kids involved in brainstorming and figuring out what's going to help them calm down the most, what they want to include in their ritual, in their bedtime routine. But here are some best practices that are generally considered part of good sleep hygiene. So you want to have a very consistent bedtime routine. That includes a very consistent bedtime and then also what you do leading up to bedtime. Limit caffeine and stimulating activities before bed. So, don't go running a marathon. And keep the bedroom cool, dark, and quiet. Repetition over time will wire your kid's brain that beds are for sleep. Using screens in bed confuses this and can lead to sleep troubles. And these habits build a good foundation that can go a long way in helping them wind down. If you've ever heard of Pavlov's dog, he was a researcher that trained his dogs to associate being fed with the ringing of a bell. And he observed that whenever you rang the bell, they started drooling because they were anticipating being fed. You can do this to yourself, and you can also do this with your kids, where you train their brains to associate bed with sleep. And if you do the same things and repeat them over and over again, eventually you will notice that they can get to sleep faster and sleep longer and better throughout the night. So for sleep time best practices, for screen-specific sleep tips, consider having no screens in bedrooms at all. I know this is kind of a tall ask, but it really does make a huge difference. You can create a shared charging station in a common area and use a basic alarm clock instead of your phones as alarm clocks. Setting a screen curfew, research says about an hour before bed, can help kids fall asleep faster and sleep more soundly. So now is a good time to maybe pause this and have a conversation with your partner, have a conversation with your kids. What does your bedtime currently look like in your house? What's working well, and where do you want to make changes? Is it something you struggle with? Ask your kids outright, hey, do you feel like you're struggling falling asleep? Do you feel like you're struggling staying asleep? Those are two very different things. Um, there are definitely, ways that you can improve either of those things. But if it really becomes a problem, definitely reach out to your child's therapist and pediatrician. So we're going to talk a little bit more about screen time and mental health. I want to start with some of the positive benefits. So screens can expose users to new ideas and information. They can raise awareness of current events and issues, promote community participation, help students work with others on assignments and projects. It can also have social benefits that allows families and friends to stay in touch no matter where they live. It can enhance access to support networks, which is especially important for people with illnesses and disabilities, and especially, neurodivergent kids who might have limited access otherwise. Some screen time is okay and even helpful. It can support learning, communication, and community. But when it becomes excessive, the risks do increase. Half of teens report using screens for 4 or more hours a day just for entertainment. That kind of exposure has been linked to higher rates of anxiety and depression. So the numbers on this slide are really striking. Teens using screens for 4 or more hours a day, which we already said over half of them do, they're over twice as likely to have symptoms of anxiety and depression. And when that usage climbs to 5 or more hours a day, research has linked that to thoughts of self-harm and suicide. This doesn't mean screens cause these issues directly, but they can absolutely make things worse, especially when they replace real life connection, healthy coping skills, and physical activity. So we're going to talk about some of the signs and symptoms to look out for here. It's going to be really important that you learn what these signs and symptoms are, and that you also teach your kids what to look out for in themselves, and also what to look out for in their peers, in their friends. So you're going to want to be on the lookout for mood swings, irritability, withdrawal, and trouble sleeping, especially when kids aren't on their devices. So if they have huge mood swings whenever you have to set a boundary or take screens away, whenever they can't be on their devices, if you see a huge uptick in anxiety, those are red flags. Loss of interest in activities outside of screens, sudden grade drops, appetite changes, those are also red flags too. When you talk with your kids, use open-ended questions like, how do you feel after being online? These help kids reflect and share more than yes or no questions do. If you notice these symptoms in your child, have an open conversation with them about what you're noticing. If it becomes more of a struggle, seek professional help from a therapist or your child's pediatrician. So, teaching kids to manage screen time starts with self-awareness. Help them recognize when screen use makes them feel stressed or low. Then give them healthy tools like journaling, movement, art, and mindfulness to cope. It's just as important for you to model these behaviors as well. Kids learn best from what we do, not just what we say. Teaching your child about the potential effects of too much screen time can help them notice it more when and if it happens to them, and it can lead to self-correction. It also gives context for boundaries you set with screens and shows them the value of honoring those boundaries. So now we're going to talk about social media and how it affects mental health. Social media, I wanted to kind of pull out and talk about specially because it's kind of in a category on its own and it has some specific research tied to it. So nearly all teens are online, with social media being a primary outlet. Some platforms, especially those with heavy beauty content and filters, can seriously impact self-esteem. Social media is expanding quickly, and as parents, it's hard or almost impossible to keep up. There are so many apps out there, and there are so many more coming. This is just a small sample. And some of them I didn't even realize were social media or had chat functions and things like that, but it turns out they do. And that's why it's so important to stay involved and have regular conversations about what kids are seeing and what they're feeling online. Keeping kids safe must include more than restriction. It must include education and open communication to be effective. So going a little bit further into social media, most social media apps do require users to be at least 13, but almost none of them actually verify that you're 13. So content moderation is weak to non-existent, and kids can easily stumble across harmful material like glorified self-harm, toxic comparison to others, or extreme dieting. While some teens find support online, others are deeply affected by what they see. It's not just about limits, it's about education and trust. Do you know what social media accounts your child currently has? Do you or another trusted adult have any access to see what your child or teenager is posting? There are a lot of risks of using it, and you're going to need some open communication and some trust built up. When it comes to best practices and suggestions for boundaries, you want to encourage kids to keep real world friendships strong. Anything in person trumps anything online just about any day. Promote breaks from social media when it starts to feel overwhelming or toxic. And that goes back to them being able to recognize when it's starting to get to that point. Teach them to think critically about what they see and talk to them about privacy and safety. Ask questions like, have you ever taken a break from social media when it feels bad? How did it make you feel to take that break? That opens the door to real reflection and healthy change. Be open and vulnerable about your own struggles or experiences with internet and social media because we've all had them at this point. So now we're going to launch into internet safety. Let's get into cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is a term that you hear more and more because it's becoming alarmingly common and dangerous. It affects 10 to 40% of teens, which is a pretty wide percentage, but the reason why it's that wide is because there's a lot of shame and stigma, and so it's often underreported. It is linked to increased risk of suicide, even among those who perpetuate it. Cyberbullying is when somebody targets somebody else, specifically online, with horrible things. So instead of on the playground, it's online. And unlike traditional bullying, it can happen anytime, anywhere, and it's often public and permanent. The best defense is a mix of open communication, some monitoring, and teaching kids to be kind and responsible online. That's a term that you'll hear called good digital citizenship. This is kind of a sensitive topic, but we do need to touch on it. Sexting, which is sending or receiving sexual content, is a lot more common than many parents realize. 1 in 5 teens have sent an explicit photo. And that's not just consuming sexual content, that is, they sent an explicit photo. These images can easily be shared, saved, or used for blackmail. Many kids don't know how to use privacy settings or understand the risks involved. Education here is absolutely essential. I know it can be an overwhelming topic for many parents and far more in depth than we can get into here. But if you don't take the time to teach your kids and specifically your teen, realistically about sex, the internet will. And it won't do a good job. And unfortunately, many kids get hurt because of it. One thing I do want to point out here, there are third-party apps currently being created that can take apps with perceived privacy, like Snapchat, and they can screenshot and save photos without the knowledge or consent of the person on the other end. So you can't always assume that you have anonymity or that you have privacy in any of these apps. So I wanted to specifically talk about something called sextortion. Sextortion is when someone threatens to release explicit content unless the child sends more explicit content or gives them money. So we talked about how privacy is a big time issue, and sextortion is a large reason why. And unfortunately, sexual predators use sextortion as a way to keep kids and teens silent about their online activities and keep them from reporting the bad behavior or the abuse to a trusted adult. It's a serious and growing issue, and warning signs of this include increased secrecy, sudden mood changes, or unexplained gifts. Again, monitoring and conversations here are critical. You have to let kids know that they can come to you without fear of judgment. There's a trend of needing to establish open communication early and often with your child or teen. So, we're going to talk about how to talk to your kids about screen time. There was some research recently published that over 90% of parents studied thought that it was important to regulate what their kids consumed online, but less than 30% actually felt like they had the technological know-how to actually do that. And a large driver of this is because technology is expanding and changing so quickly that it's so hard for the average person to keep up. I know myself, I struggle with that too. I'm a nurse. I don't have an IT degree. And so I know that a large part of my ability to regulate what my kid consumes on the internet is going to be through education and through open communication and keeping that line open. So when you talk with your kids about technology, lead with curiosity and collaboration, not control. Use language like, how can we make this work better for all of us? Be aware of your own screen habits. Kids notice everything. Heavy parent screen use is linked to more conflict and less engagement. So let's model the balance that we want to see. And I know as a millennial, that's really hard for me because I know I'm addicted to screens on my phone. And my husband is also has the same problem where we're just constantly on our phone. And our son has noticed that. And it's really hard for us to say, hey, you can't be on your Switch when here we are sitting right next to him, you know, texting on our phones. It's kind of a hard sell. So what I want you guys to do is talk with your partner, talk with your family. What has worked or not worked when talking to your kids about screen time? And when I say talk to your kids, actually ask them this question. Say, hey, when we've talked about this before, what do you think has worked? Or what have we talked about? Or how have I approached this that you didn't like or that puts you on the defensive? It can be a little bit daunting at first because you don't get to necessarily control the outcomes, but when you approach your child with openness, a lot of times, as long as you're consistent with it, they will start to open up back. So here I've linked some great tools. The American Academy of Pediatrics has an online media plan builder that you can use with your child. It's similar to the one that we've linked, but it goes into some different things, and it also has a lot of suggestions for boundaries you can put in place, especially if you use it in tandem with the one we linked. That's going to be a really, really comprehensive approach. It'll give you a whole bunch of different ideas of directions that you could take boundaries with screens with your family. AT&T, that second link, it has a phone readiness tool to help you decide when your child is ready for their phone, for their own device. I know it might seem a little bit biased because it's AT&T and of course they want you to have phones, but they actually partnered with the American Academy of Pediatrics, so it's an evidence-based tool. They're not just going to say, of course your child's ready for a phone because AT&T wants to sell you one. No, they actually go into, okay, what behaviors and what attitudes does your kid have? Here's what to look out for. And it's really a good place to start. And then that third link, I encourage you guys to check this out. The American Academy of Pediatrics put a whole page of articles about media use, and they're really clear and practical and evidence-based. And if you have any specific problems, chances are they've got something for that. And so now I want to encourage you to take a look at the shorter questionnaire that you've hopefully been filling out throughout all of this and start transferring some of that into your family tech plan and having a really comprehensive conversation about your own screen usage and about your kids' screen usage. Where are you at now and where do you want to be? That's going to really lay the foundation for what boundaries that you put in place. And again, lead with collaboration and curiosity with your kids. Include them in this dialogue so they feel like they have a say and they have a stake in it. And so you'll find that when you include them in that, they will take more accountability. And hopefully you will see less pushback on setting these boundaries with screens because they will understand a little bit more why it is so important. Because you're not just saying, oh, you can't do this just to be a jerk. You're doing this because their brains are still growing and because it's your job as their parent to keep them safe. And a lot of times, if you frame things in that sort of way, kids will respond positively and they will want to help themselves along with you, especially if it's viewed as collaborative and not prescriptive, and if you are, not just telling them what to do or being a jerk. So I hope that helps. And then we're going to go on and I'm going to list all of these references that are at the end. You can check those out on your own too. They're great references. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. And I hope this definitely helps. Thank you guys so much for your time.